Fasten your seatbelt. I'm taking you for the ride of your life. I'm going to show you what this car can really do. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Hang on.
Okay.
Here we go.
Hold on to your butts.
Go get him, kid.
It might be a tumor.
It's not a tumor. Not a tumor at all.
As if you're going to ask me. So you can go ahead and ask me what you're going to ask me. And my natural response could be to get offended.
Hey, want to hear the most annoying sound in the world?
Yeah, well, you know, that's just like your opinion, man.
All right.
You're listening to the 30-something movie podcast. One movie each week, 30 years in the making. That's right, it's the 30-something movie podcast. It's episode number 281, RoboCop 2 this time around. Very, very quickly, we spoil the movies we talk about. We spoil freely. Much like milk that's been in the fridge for 6 months, spoiled everywhere. So just be warned. iTunes reviews, please leave us a 5-star review. That's the only thing that you can leave on there. That's the only choice you get. 5 stars. You love everything about this show. And if you don't, you can leave us a review on MySpace. Visit our website. Is MySpace still around?
I think it is. I think it's some weird alt community now, but it's there.
Okay. You can access it with your BlackBerry.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. Well, I'll never be able to get back into
BlackBerry.
it. Okay. All right. I can't use a Palm Pilot.
You know what? That might be the other piece of equipment that it gets you.
Okay.
There.
I actually have. I think somewhere I have a Palm Pilot in a box somewhere.
Does it have a stylus with it?
It does have a stylus with it. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Kind of looks like the stylus that used to come with those little faces that you get that have the little magnetic pieces inside.
Yep.
You'd make the mustaches and the beards on them. And kind of looks like that, but all right. And also our website, 30podcast.com. Visit there to just find out everything else about our show, voicemail line, past episodes, social media, all that other fun stuff. Tonight, I'm joined by Pat and Bo. Pat, how you doing?
I'm doing well, John. How are you guys doing?
I think I'm doing okay. Well, we're back here talking some movies again, so I'm always good when we're here talking movies. Very, very quickly, before we get into our RoboCop stuff, there were a couple of other things I was going to run by you gentlemen real fast. Pat, I know you're not a fan of the horror movie. Bo,
not per se,
not usually. We'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, unless it's an Evil Dead or something like that.
Yeah, you never know. Know.
What about the Saw movies?
I have not seen those.
Haven't seen any of those? Okay.
Donna saw the first one and liked it. The second one she said was too much, and that was it.
Okay. All right. I've seen bits and pieces of the first one. I've never seen the whole thing all the way through. But I saw something today that the Saw movies are being rebooted by Chris Rock.
Oh, for God's sakes.
So apparently they're going to incorporate more humor. It's still going to be gory and violent, but it's going to incorporate more humor. So I guess I don't know enough about the Saw movies to be affected by that one way or another, but it almost makes it sound like it would be more on the same level of humor as the Evil Dead movies.
Oh, that could be interesting.
So it could be interesting.
Yeah, give it a shot.
I saw that, and Chris Rock is not the one that I think of. Well, I guess at the same time, I wouldn't have thought of Jordan Peele writing 2 really successful horror movies either. So,
right, exactly.
There it is.
And the only other thing I was going to mention here is something that I saw, and I commented on this on Twitter, and it drives me nuts when I see this stuff. There was a headline that said the Rise of Skywalker is Disney's first $1 billion disappointment.
Wow.
Oh boy.
And that just I don't know. It makes me a little frustrated to see that kind of stuff, because I'm like, you know what? There are people who make movies and they probably work their tail off to make it the best movie they could possibly make it. They probably invest a ton of their own money into it, and they will never make anywhere near $1 billion. And so for some people to sit there and go, "Oh, it made $1 billion, but it's such a disappointment." I'm like that. I don't know what the Hollywood equivalent of first world problems is, but
yeah.
How about it?
Yeah.
I just saw that and I got a little frustrated.
I got to be honest with you, and I'm not done with Star Wars, but I'm kind of done with Star Wars and all the stuff around Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Let me back up. I just said I'm not done with Star Wars. I'm just kind of done with talking about Star Wars. I'm kind of at the point where now I'm just yeah, I like Star Wars. I like the movies.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go and I'm going to enjoy it. And that's it. That's just kind of where I'm at. I'm just tired of it. I'm tired of that being news. Like you just said, first world problems, so
right.
That's just, yeah.
Well, everything has to be hyped and discussed and whatever to the extreme. You can't just enjoy the movie anymore.
Yeah. That's kind of what it seems like.
Yeah. If you don't make $1.6 billion or whatever, then
$1 billion.
To the Motor City we go. Our movie this time around is RoboCop 2. It came out on the 22nd of June, 1990, rated R, with a runtime of 1 hour and 57 minutes, directed by Irvin Kershner, who died in 2010. He did The Empire Strikes Back and Never Say Never Again. Producer for this one was John Davison. He did RoboCop, Starship Troopers, and Airplane. Writers for this one, Edward Neumeier and Michael Miner, were credited for the characters. They did the original movie, and then they also did a first draft or first couple of drafts of this one that ended up getting rejected in favor of Frank Miller's story and screenplay. And Waylon Green was another screenplay writer on this one as well. Neumeier also did Starship Troopers. Miner also did Lawnmower Man 2. Miller did Sin City and 300, and Green also did The Wild Bunch. Cinematography was done by Leonard Rosenman. He died in 2008. He also did cinematography for Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home and the 1978 animated Lord of the Rings. Music was done by Mark Irwin, who did Old School and Scream. Budget for this one was $35 million, box office $45.7 million. The Rotten Tomatoes critics give it a 31%. Rotten Tomatoes audience gives it a 36%. IMDb gives it a 58%. Letterboxd gives it a 56%. CinemaScore gives it a B-. Peter Weller played Alex Murphy / RoboCop. He was in The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai and the TV series Longmire. Nancy Allen played Ann Lewis. She was in Dress to Kill and Poltergeist 3. Daniel O'Harely, who died in 2005, was the old man. He was the CEO of OCP. He was in The Last Starfighter and Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Tom Noonan played Kane. He was in the 12 Monkeys TV series, FX, and The Monster Squad. Belinda Bauer played Juliet Fax. These are just some great 90s names. Juliet Fax.
Just the facts, man.
Right. Coupled with Doug Modem. She was in Flashdance and UHF. Gabriel Damon was Hob. He was in The Land Before Time and Tequila Sunrise. John Glover was the Magnavolt salesman. He was in Gremlins 2, which we just did last week, and In the Mouth of Madness. Angie Bowling was Ellen Murphy. She was in Texasville and Dr. T and the Women. Willard E. Pugh, I don't know. Probably saying that one wrong, was Mayor Cusack. Pew. We're going with Pew. Yeah, I guess it was Pew. Was in Air Force One and The Color Purple. Stephen Lee, who died in 2014, played Officer Duffy. He was in La Bamba and War Games. Galen Gorg, which sounds like a Star Wars or Star Trek character.
Sounds like a Klingon.
Kind of does. Okay, good. I'd have to say it more guttural, like Galen Gorg.
Yeah, oh, yes, you'd have to.
But I gotta gargle some stuff too. Played Angie. She was Kane's girlfriend. She was in Point Break and the TV series Mantis. Do you guys remember Mantis? Did you ever watch that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that one. That was like the first superhero show before there were other superhero shows really like kind of like superhero shows the way they are now. You always had Wonder Woman from the 70s and Batman from the 60s, but I feel like this was kind of one of the first, like you had Mantis and then you had the 1990 Flash and you had, some other stuff around this time. But I vividly remember watching that. Felton Perry played Donald Johnson. He was in The Towering Inferno and Dumb and Dumber. Lisa Gibbons played Jess Perkins. She was one of the Media Break anchors. She was in Last Action Hero and Lois and Clark. Mario Machado, who died in 2013, was Casey Wong, one of the other Media Break anchors. He was in the RoboCop movies and Rocky 3. Michael Medeiros played Katso. He was one of Kane's henchmen. He was in X-Men First Class and Brawl in Cell Block 99. And Jeff McCarthy played Hulsgang. He was the lawyer that was trying to convince RoboCop to leave his wife alone. He was in Star Trek The Next Generation and Joker. Here is the trailer, and we'll be back in just a moment.
About a year ago, we gave this city RoboCop.
Ready for duty, partner?
Nothing I'd rather do.
I think he's worked out pretty well.
Have a seat. This is a bust.
But things have become a little rougher out there.
This unit needs millions of dollars in parts. You see, RoboCop's off warranty.
He's one of mine. And I want him back on his feet.
I believe that Murphy's case was unusual, but not unique. We can find someone else. someone to whom the prospect might even be desirable.
And now, we need a law enforcement unit capable of meeting the enemy on his own ground.
She's screaming psychotic, sir.
Well, we aren't planning to build a toy and carry enough firepower to get the job done.
I got good news for you. You're going to have a chance for immortality.
With great pleasure, I give you RoboCop 2. Ah, yes. Things will be a lot quieter with this boy around.
That thing is a killer!
Kane! Let's step outside.
You're obsolete!
Take it over, creep.
Behave yourselves!
All right, so let's get going with our discussion here of RoboCop 2. This episode, as I said before, episode number 281. Title of this episode, Who's Down with OCP? All the homies. So thank you. I figured somebody would pick up on that. So the questions that we've been using are adapted from the book Focus, The Art and Soul of Cinema by Tony Watkins. So let's just start it off right here. RoboCop 2. Now, we just did RoboCop a few short years ago, and I think we all liked it. And I think at the time, I even commented that watching it that time, I liked it way more than I had ever liked it before. Like I found new things about the movie it was a whole new world that was opened up to me that time when I watched the movie, and I had a much bigger appreciation for it. So this time around, RoboCop 2, how does RoboCop 2 make you feel, Bo?
Okay.
Do tell.
It's funny. Well, it's funny because the way you said it was how I wanted to feel. I was excited to see RoboCop 2, and then I wasn't as much. I can't. It's been hard for me to put my finger on what it is about it that I didn't like, but it definitely fell flat this time around. Yeah. And I think part of it is unlike some of the movies we've done recently, this one heavily dates itself.
Mm-hmm. It's 2013. It's 2013 because it's when Detroit went bankrupt.
Right. And it's just the pacing is weird and it's wrong in places, but it's wrong both ways. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like the beginning is too slow. Then there's this little section where he gets back to the police station, and then he figures out that if he goes and electrocutes himself, he's going to wipe his memory. That whole piece happens a little too fast. You don't really make the connection with him, and then he just does it. It was very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? I felt disconnected from it the whole time. Like it never really pulled me back in.
Okay.
After it lost me. I think that sums it up as best I can.
This time around, same thing. I knew I had watched RoboCop 2 years ago, and I remember this was a movie. This was kind of around about the time. Well, because we're doing them both in the same month, so they were clearly the same year. This was a set of movies that whenever we would have sleepovers when I lived over in England, and if we have if somebody was having a birthday party and it was a sleepover party or something, and usually it was about anywhere from 5 to 10 of us over at a friend's house. There a lot of times their parents didn't really care what movies we put on while we were just hanging out overnight, and there was a whole set of movies. We watched RoboCop 2, RoboCop. We watched Aliens. We watched Predator, Predator 2, Terminator 2, Army of Darkness, Universal Soldier. Like we had this like rotation of movies.
Universal Soldier. Oh my boy. God.
That's a blast from the past.
Yeah, it's or the future for us in this case. But yeah, no, we had this kind of rotation of movies that we would always we kind of pick one of those, and somebody always had a copy of one of those movies handy somehow. And so this is one of those that was kind of in that rotation. So I remember watching it a lot in middle school, probably about 6th, 7th grade or so. And obviously not a movie that I would ever show to my 6th or 7th grader, but so at the time as a kid, I remember thinking, oh, this is kind of cool. RoboCop is going up against this like crazed robot thing now, and it's like way stronger than him. And oh, that's funny. His mind has kind of been wiped, and now he's got to have all these like stupid rules that make him seem silly, and that's kind of funny. And so as a kid, I remember thinking, that's kind of cool. That's kind of fun. And then as an adult, I think I'd say since beyond high school, I've seen this movie maybe twice, including watching it just within the last few days. And it's just completely unnecessary. It's like, that's my word. You started with meh. I should have just said the word unnecessary, that this movie did not need to be made. I remember when we did RoboCop a couple years ago that I came out of watching that movie and kept thinking, you know what? This movie is actually more, I used to think of that as just an action movie, just a kind of cool action movie with the cyborg cop. And you know, it's almost like B-movie material, but like there's actually a better message there. And watching it with a critical eye for the podcast, I was like, actually, I got a whole lot more out of watching it this time around, RoboCop, the first one. And I really enjoyed that movie a whole lot more than I'd ever enjoyed it before. With this one, went to go watch it, and I'm just watching it, and I'm just going, part of me is seeing a bunch of missed opportunities, but the other part of me is just saying, this is not doing anything new. This is just rehashing everything from the first movie and doing it worse than the first movie did it. It's not even improving on it.
Yeah, unless I suppose if you like the idea of, old dude losing his mind after they put him in the machine, that's a thing.
Right. Well, and that could have been interesting. But they just didn't explore that at all. Right.
It just happened.
Yeah.
That's
there was just so much.
Like the whole movie, it all just happened.
It just happened. Right. So without going into too much detail on that, because we'll get a little bit more specific here in just a minute on things we did and didn't like. But I think my overall feeling on this one was disappointed and just feeling that I had witnessed something that didn't need to be. So not that I didn't like it, because I'm still entertained by it. It's a fun movie.
I was entertained. It was an action movie. The stuff with him and his partner is still interesting. Mm-hmm. It's always good when the old machine can beat up the new machine, and when the big bad company gets their comeuppance.
Right.
But they're insured, so it's okay.
Right.
It's just, yeah.
Now, in 3 years, when we get to RoboCop 3, I may actually hate that movie from what I remember, but we'll talk about that in 3 years.
I was saying, we got time for that.
Yeah, I got some time to formulate my thoughts on that. So, Pat, you had, before we started recording, you kind of had an interesting tone of voice when I asked if we were ready to start talking about RoboCop 2. So I'm curious. Pat, how do you feel?
Well, so it's interesting. This is the first time that I kind of watched RoboCop and RoboCop 2 and kind of felt about it. I saw RoboCop 2 probably way too young. John, you said you were junior high, right?
Yeah, it's probably 6th or 7th grade.
Okay. I don't know if I was that young. I think I was probably 8th grade, maybe going into high school. And it's funny, the way you described it was very much the same experience that I had. This is just fun action movie. Wow, there's like blood and body parts flying all over the place. I don't normally see that. Wow. So, I mean, that was kind of my initial take on the movie. It was an action movie. The fact that there was a kid that swore a bunch and was like right in the action was like a little bit, I don't want to say different, but that was like, oh, wow, man, there's some kid in there. Like, I wonder what his story, like, how did he get wrapped up in all this? I remember thinking that as a kid, but that was pretty much it. And that was my entry into RoboCop. Like, I saw RoboCop 2 before I saw the original. And
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, no. And I just thought of it as like, okay, cool action. The robots are cool. You know, I mean, all right. And that was pretty much it. I'd come back to it over the years. I remember then at some point I saw the original RoboCop, and I kind of watched through it. And this time I was like, all right, RoboCop 2, that was fun, man. He got into the fight with the drug dealer ends up buried into the RoboCop thing. And, it just was going to be more of the first one, and on my kind of superficial level. Now, after looking at it, I started thinking, I started reading some of the reviews and like, what did Siskel and Ebert say when it came out? And it, and all that. And it seems like people were really shocked with the amount of violence and that they had a kid as one of the bad guy leads and everything like that. And so then I was like watching it and I'm like, yeah, that's a lot of violence. So what are they doing? Is this like, are they marketing it for kids? Like what's the thing? And I started to fall away from it. And then I started thinking about it like today. I was still thinking about it before this podcast. And I kind of came back to, yeah, as far as like an action movie goes, like, okay, RoboCop fights bad guys. And I mean, it's not, it's not Oscar material, but it's just an action movie. And then I had some other thoughts on, like, is there a kid in there and the violence and the whole thing? But yeah, so I've kind of gone back and forth, I've kind of bounced back and forth, and now I'm just kind of settling on, it's an action movie. Things blow up, good guys win. That's that. I mean, I don't look any deeper or anything beyond it. So how does it make me feel? I thought good, but now I'm just, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. So did you, when you're saying, maybe not so much, before Bo and I started talking about it, and before you looked anything up, or just watching it this last time without anybody else's input or influence, you were watching it, you're just like, it's not what I remember.
No, it's funny. I watched it and I'm like, this is what I remember. And that was why I was going to come into this podcast tonight and just talk about, man, I can't believe it. This was the year of sequels. I mean, my first line was going to be, hey, do you guys remember how they always say sequels are usually never as good as the original? I think these movies are disproving the rule. Mm-hmm. That was going to be the first thing I said tonight. But then I watched it and I was like, let me think what the critics said. And then the critics, they brought up good points. And I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, and why was there this? And why was I watching this movie so young? And why all that violence? I mean, it was just like, yeah, I don't know. Is this like, I wasn't sure. But then and I could get into it more later, but then I got thinking like, okay, I got to thinking about modern movies and I'm like, is there really that much more violence in this than movies that passes PG-13 movies today? I mean, there's more graphic, but exactly. So then I got thinking
I think the movies today are more psychological than they were back then.
Yeah.
So your violence is more tied to the psychology of the killer or whatever. And it's much more mental torment than most of the violence in the late 80s and all through the 90s was mostly just action violence.
Right.
It wasn't tied to torturing anyone or trying to break them down as a human being.
And I'm kind of stalling out. I'm stalling out on the first question. I don't want to bog the podcast down. But yeah, I guess that's it. It's like it was all just on my own. I just really thought about this movie a lot and kind of bounced back and forth. And it's funny because what you guys are talking about is kind of like all the beats that I'm kind of hitting with this is I'm like I'm right there with you. But when I first watched it or rewatched it, even for this time, I wasn't there. It was afterwards I read and it's like, wow, they're bringing up good points. And so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it. So does it make me feel? If I just think, hey, this is an action movie, and I'll probably watch it again, and I'll watch the original again. Action movie, yeah, cool. As anything else, or if I think about it, I don't know. And I got to be honest. I mean, sometimes I struggle with the movies that are, this is a big what do you call it? Not a parallel. What's the word I'm looking for?
Allegory.
This is an allegory for fill in the blank. And sometimes I struggle with that. And Bo, I'm going to use your line. We were discussing one of the Friendly Fire podcast and stuff. And you brought up a line where, we talked about how different people analyze movies. And you said something to the effect of sometimes, people, when they analyze movies, can see things that aren't really there. Mm-hmm. And that is something I struggle with. And it's funny because I watch these movies and I still kind of struggle a little bit to see, RoboCop as, hey man, it's a cool action movie. Now the first one, I get where, it's showing the excesses of, some of what our world is like and what the excesses can lead to. And like this one, Sunblock 2000 and, the car protection thing that electrocutes the guy. And, I get that points to our excesses, and corporations that are running mad and buying out cities. But I don't know. I found this thing on YouTube that was interesting. I'll have to share the link with you guys, but it broke it down and said, is RoboCop 2 really a big, and it was allegory or what? And they were describing how did this guy break it down? RoboCop 2 is actually describing what the movie corporations or whatever did to the RoboCop franchise. And like RoboCop represented the original RoboCop. The bad guys represented this, and this represented this. The fact that they had a kid in there, you know, and he got this guy got into, you know, there's all these R-rated movies like, you know, Rambo and RoboCop and Terminator and all, but then they made toys and marketed them for little kids.
Mm-hmm.
So kids were buying the toys for these things. They had no business watching these movies. And so they tried to water it down, but didn't. And like all the things the guy was saying, like, oh man, that made perfect sense. And wow, that's really interesting. But it's like, did they really intend that in the movie? Or are we just kind of like fan fiction adding this stuff in? I don't know. I'm kind of rambling because I'm not sure about the whole thing. So that's how I feel about the movie. Herein ends the dissertation.
I think I just heard Bo's ringtone go off, and I wanted to say enter.
Yeah, I was.
Come in, number one. Yeah, so I mean that kind of takes us into our next couple of questions, and I think maybe our next question is what works about this movie and what's memorable about this. And I think we've kind of already maybe said most of what we want to say about that. Is, you know, as an action movie, it's fun, it's entertaining.
Yeah.
I don't know that I can say that there's too much memorable about this movie. There's a lot of it's a lot of generic action. Like I could have taken the action in this movie and inserted it into any other action movie property, and there wouldn't necessarily be anything different about it, other than RoboCop can take a few more bullets than your typical cop can take. Other than that, it's really, there's not a whole lot about this one that sticks in my mind, you know. Whereas if we're talking about the first one, you've got all the lines like I'd buy that for $1, and you know, some of the other stuff that happens throughout that movie, like the way the movie ends, and you know, there's just so much that's memorable about that. But this one, other than just kind of being an entertaining action movie, I don't know that I think of a whole lot that's super memorable about RoboCop 2.
Well, yeah, I mean, not a lot of super memorable for sure. It's definitely, it's trying to be more than an action movie. I'm not sure it's succeeding.
Yeah. No.
We're in 1990. We're at the first Bushes are in the White House. You're seeing the Just Say No to Drugs campaign continue from the Reagans, and I think the drug message is definitely there, almost beating you over the head every time they pull out that big tube for the big robot. I still think it does me good at it.
Yeah, well, so I guess that kind of will take us into the kind of the next follow-up question is what doesn't work about this movie. And I think for me, it's that this movie, I mentioned before, I really like so much about how I think the first RoboCop succeeds. If you want to watch it as a pure action movie, it is, and it's great. If you want to look for a deeper meaning in that action movie, that is also there. And it's solid. Like the story supports it, the way everything plays out supports that deeper meaning, that allegory, that whatever you want to call it. It's there if you want to look for it. If you don't and you just want to see stuff blow up, go for it. You can see stuff blow up. This movie, I think it is not able to do that because the story seems fairly convoluted. Like there's really not, I look at this movie and I think there's really not anything. Why do you need a RoboCop for this movie? It's this drug guy, and he gets put into this robot body at some point, but then ultimately in the end, is anything actually solved? Did RoboCop really do anything that, you know, somebody else couldn't have done at some point? You know, what was it why did we need a RoboCop in this movie? And I think back to, if you're going to progress from the first movie and take what was done so well and add to it for a sequel, to make a sequel, you know, worthy of being a continuation of the story, I think you needed to take the whole idea of him wondering if he's still human. And that, I mean, that's how the movie starts off. The movie starts off with, you know, him kind of stalking his wife. Well, back up just a minute. I had a funny thought when I was watching it, because the movie actually starts off with that Magnavolt commercial. And I was thinking, I feel so bad for Daniel Clamp from Gremlins 2 that he has sunk so far that he has to be the Magnavolt salesman now. You know, things went so wrong with his building that he was, you know, ousted as CEO, and now he's a Magnavolt salesman.
They sued him into being a pitchman.
Well, that's true. That's true.
That Billy Mays guy made a lot of money. You never know.
Yeah. But I mean, we start this movie with him kind of stalking. I mean, and that right there, that opens up the door for why is a RoboCop going back and sitting outside his wife's house, watching her and watching his child, and like that started a thread that should have been continued through the rest of the movie. And there are moments where he's talking to the lawyer, and the lawyer is trying to get him to say, "You are not human." And then I feel like from about that point on, that story beat is completely dropped. And we don't ever come back to it until we get to the final, I think it was the final line of the movie, when is it Lewis or somebody says something like, "Oh man, OCP is going to get away with it again." And RoboCop says something like, "Well, we'll get him later. After all, we're only human." And then the movie's over. I'm like, there were so many times that you could have gone down the road of him questioning or trying to defend the fact that he's alive, or
and so are my movies just like crossing in my head? Because there was more of that in one of the movies, right?
I feel like there was more of that in the first one, where he's still trying to.
The first one,
I think. I mean, it's still been a few years since we watched it, but
I know, and I'm sitting there that was one of the scenes that as I'm watching it, I'm like, am I watching the right movie?
Yeah.
I feel like there's a scene missing here where, but maybe that's my problem. Maybe I'm putting in
one of the behind the scenes things that I read was that Irvin Kershner at different points as they were making the movie would be on the set just like tearing pages out of the script and saying that they were horrible on days they were filming.
Oh well, there you go. That could
maybe there was a scene missing.
Yeah, and it's funny because you were going to say like scenes that they even kind of like interrupted a scene when his wife came and she says, "Matt Murphy or Alex, is that you or what?" And he says, "Touch me." "Oh, it's cold." And then he's like, "They made this to honor him." And I'm like, okay, he's going to launch into a speech, or there's going to be a back and forth, or there's going to be something. And then it was like, "Your husband's dead," and he turned around and walked away. And it was like, whoa! I feel like right in that scene. I mean, I thought it was such a great setup. They made this to honor him.
Right.
And then they end it. It was like, well, no, there should be like 5 minutes of dialogue there.
Yeah, there was no payoff to a lot of things.
Yeah.
So some interesting points. The original script for this movie actually had RoboCop being almost completely destroyed and being rebuilt 25 years later. So it's even further into the future. Detroit is even more messed up than it was before. So it's even more dystopian. And when he's rebuilt that quarter of a century later, he's then kind of being sought after as a pawn in the schemes of the government, the greedy corporations, and kind of the downtrodden public. And so those three groups are kind of trying to like jockey for power, and you know, the public is trying to restore what life used to be like, and of course you got the greedy corporations, and you've got the kind of greedy, inefficient government, and so that was meant to be like the original draft of this. And then ultimately they scrapped that screenplay and went with Frank Miller's screenplay, which then in turn was also partially scrapped by Irvin Kershner when they got to filming, because he just at different times he was just like, "Nope, this part, I hate this part, I don't like this part, taking this out." And I read up on it, and I read the list of what some of the deleted scenes were for this movie, and I'm reading it going, well, that's everything that I felt was missing.
Well,
like everything.
So thought they needed to be there.
Right. I mean, there were more moments with him and his wife. There were more moments with Kane establishing why he might have some kind of a beef against RoboCop. You know, all kinds of different bits and pieces that should have tied some of these threads together. And those were the deleted scenes that were deemed unnecessary for this movie. And I'm looking at that list, and I'm going, that actually would have fixed a lot of my problems with this movie.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing with him. To me, that would have been a great way. And when we get into our three questions, one of the questions was, how would you, if you were going to redo a RoboCop movie, what would your plot be, and who would you cast in the parts? Part of my plot is going to be similar to the plot of RoboCop 1, because I think it's been done so well. But part of that is I think it's got to tie into it's the whole piece of you have a half human, half machine, and that has to be your main story beat. Is for him as a character, how's he dealing with that? Like, what if he's not human, if he's this emotionless robot, then that character is not going anywhere. And what's the point of making more movies? He'll never learn anything. He'll never, I mean, even the Terminator got, he learned emotion. He learned how to say hasta la vista, baby. He evolved. If there's no humanity to RoboCop, he's not evolving, then what's the point? And I think that's what I wanted to see in this movie was let's follow some more of those plot beats and let's have him. An interesting thing I thought was, what if in this movie, so let's play alternate universe now. What if in this movie, at the beginning of the movie, his wife is the one that rejects him? Like she sees what he's become, she rejects him, she wants to have nothing to do with him, and then maybe we then jump forward a couple months or something. And what I would have loved to have seen, because I thought she was done so well in the first movie, is I would have loved it if Officer Lewis, his partner, had been in this movie. Because she really wasn't in this movie. I know she showed up on occasion, but she didn't do anything in this movie. And I've always thought that she is kind of the perfect partner for RoboCop to have, because she's got the emotion, she's got the human side of her. She's not as cynical as the other cops are in dystopian Detroit. So that's something he can play off of. It would have been interesting to see, and I don't know what route you would like to take the word love interest, but it would be interesting to see a relationship of some kind, whether that's love or just companionship or what, develop between the two of them as partners and as cyborg and human.
Yeah, you're right. They don't spend any time with the buddy cop moments that they could have had.
Not at all. I feel like one of the only scenes that they're together is when they're busting the Little League gang.
Yeah.
Other than that, she's barely in this movie, and she was one of my favorite characters in the first movie. And spoiler alert: if you haven't seen RoboCop 3, spoiler alert, she gets killed off in RoboCop 3. So,
well, and it's one of those things. Like, if they weren't going to do anything with it, why did they bother to bring her back? Why not just get some rando?
Right.
Oh, he's got a new partner now, and we're moving on. It would have made as much sense as what they did with her.
Right.
Yes.
Right. That's what I would have liked to have seen in this movie. So that's kind of what doesn't work for me is some of the bits and pieces that I felt like were just completely dropped. The other one, and then I'll shut up and I'll let you guys talk. The other one was actually one of the things that you didn't like, Pat, was the kid.
Yeah.
Was the character of Hobb, the kid. Now, there's a twisted part of me that wishes that character had been more.
Well, no, it's funny. It's funny you say that, because that's like what I want to see is like, who is that kid? Like, where did he come from? What's the like? And it's not even so much that I didn't like him, because even growing up, I was kind of like, wow, that kid's pretty messed up. Like, what's his deal?
Yeah.
But it was like I kind of felt like I shouldn't like him based on all the critics freak out, and then it was just kind of like, where did he come from?
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean for that kid. I mean, if you want to go for that deeper meaning route, but if this is just an action movie and you want to, allow people the opportunity to not worry about the deeper meaning, you can hit two birds with one stone, and you could make that kid, because that kid I think is supposed to show the corruption of, like, even the kids in this city are corrupt. Like, right. There's no hope for the future because the Little League team is stealing stuff from the electronics store. This kid is like almost number 2 in command for this nuke cult. He's being groomed by Kane, it seems like, to take over someday potentially. And if you're going to do that, then don't just make this a foul-mouthed, gun-toting kid. Like, actually put some more meat into that character and have him be something more, like, if he needs to be more intense. If that's the message you're going with, and that's the character that you want to use to kind of shock people into saying, hey, if the world goes this route, this is your end result, is a kid like this.
Yeah.
Then make it shocking. Like, take it to a level beyond what they did in this movie. Because at different points in the movie, I look at him and I just go, that character could have been so much more. And he just becomes a caricature at this point. I would have loved to have seen that kid be more intense than he was, even though he's just a kid. For the purposes of the story, I would have loved to have seen that character be more than what he was. So right. I've rambled on for a while now. Those are the things that don't work for me. I think for the most part, that pretty much covers the stuff that I was thinking about. That I kind of starred. I made some notes and I starred a couple of things, and my 2 stars kind of sum up what I just said. My first one was, what does RoboCop bring to the Detroit police force beyond being a near indestructible robo battering ram? And what can RoboCop teach us about humanity? And I feel like if you can answer those two questions, that's the basis for your movie.
Gosh, I think you hit a lot of it right on the head, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but
maybe that would have helped if they had a dead horse that we could put in the middle of the movie and just beat it.
The lack of relationship building, just in general, the one-dimensionalness of all of it.
Which is so interesting. The relationship piece is so interesting because that's what Irvin Kershner is known for.
Yeah, it makes me feel better that you heard a little bit about him having some trouble with scripts and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, I think of Star Trek V. We were talking about that. We talked about that being like a jumbled kind of a movie. But in watching it, I think if I remember right, we saw some stuff in there that was like, wow, there's some pretty cool stuff in there. Or, man, we're exploring someone's pain. Wow, that could be a fantastic device for a movie if they would have just followed it through. And that's why we kind of had the problem with Star Trek V, if I remember correctly. With this movie, I feel like that goes even one step further. It's not even like they have some really cool device that they start to explore. It's like they have all these options and then just use none of them. Mm-hmm. This kid, they don't use it. The relationship with him and his partner, they don't use it. The relationship with him and his wife, they don't use it. Him being more human or more robotic, they don't use it. I mean, it's like it's one step removed from what Star Trek V did, and that's like they don't even like try to explore something more interesting than RoboCop killing people. Mm-hmm. And I think that's my reaction to the movie this time is all the critics and things that I read and everything. It wasn't like, oh man, that really ruined my opinion of the movie. It was like, well, okay, let me see. Are they right or wrong? And then when I looked at it, I found past the superficial level, there really isn't much else there. And so it's like, oh, well, there's not much there to defend or to point to. It is just kind of a violent action pick. And that's kind of it.
That's you actually just made me think of something else when you mentioned Star Trek V, is that, the Kane character is, I mean, he's the head of this nuke cult, everybody in it is addicted to the nuke drug. But at the same time, we're kind of missing that point of it too, is he's supposed to be this messianic figure within this cult that never gets played with, that never, what would be interesting to me is, so you have this figure that everyone in this nuke cult looks up to as their leader and their potential savior and messiah or whatever. And he gets, I'm using quote fingers, he gets killed and he gets put into a robot body. What could have been interesting along with that theme of, is RoboCop human? Is he a robot? What is he? If Kane gets turned into a robot, then this cult that he's a leader of, what if those people start questioning, oh, maybe the future is we all should be robots? And that takes a story strand off in a particular direction about, do people voluntarily start making themselves cyborgs in this future because of what's been happening with RoboCop and now Kane? And I just every time it seems like we talk about something new with this movie, I'm like, oh, that's another thing that they could have done. It just, and I don't know why that wasn't explored. It just seems like such a natural offshoot from, I've heard the song Desperado like 4 times in the last 2 or 3 days.
Oh, geez.
Some fine things have been laid at your table and you haven't used or eaten any of them. They're just sitting there getting cold. So
yeah,
it's just, it's the more and not like, I'm not saying we should like stop talking, but the more we start talking, the more we keep talking about this movie, the more frustrated I get, because I'm just sitting here going, come on, guys. You had so many things.
Yeah. I mean, and like I say, I'll watch it again and I'll probably enjoy it, but I kind of have to just enjoy it for pops, munch some popcorn, stuff blows up. Mm-hmm. That's it.
And it does still satisfy that stuff blows up for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It does. Yeah. Yeah. Just turn your brain off a little bit.
Yeah. It definitely disappointed, didn't it?
All right, so let's try to spice this up a little bit here. Let's try to bring this thing out of the dystopian Detroit gutter now. Is there an acting performance in this movie that you like best? Is there somebody that you're like, that person? Like, even if we didn't care for the movie itself as a whole, that person is memorable. That person did a great job.
Well, I mean,
I guess the kid.
Mm-hmm.
I've tried my hand at acting, John, as you well know, and I know that it's a heck of a lot harder than. So I'm just always careful with the acting performances thing, because it's real easy to just be, oh, it's all garbage. But then, like, it's not like I could go in there and act any better. You know what I'm saying? So that question.
Do you feel a tad flat? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's exactly, in so many different ways. That's exactly what I'm saying. And
the band director, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, exactly. But that's kind of just where I get to with that. It's like, that's a hard question to answer, just because, there's reason that those folks are the ones that are the actors and actresses and all that. So as far as an acting performance that stood out,
I like the old man. I like the old man just because he's so slimy.
Yeah.
He's just a fun villain. I mean, he was a fun villain in the first one and the second one. And it just, in the midst of a movie where so many other things were kind of disappointing, I'm like, no, you know what? I like that guy. I mean, I hate that guy.
There you go.
But I like that guy.
Right.
He's just a good villain. He's just a good, slimy, greedy villain.
And sometimes that's important. You got to have that.
Yep.
Well, if we can't think of it.
Yeah, I think that should sum it up. Maybe that should go on the RoboCop 2. Dot.
Right.
Dot.
Well, we're in the 90s now. We can put things that make you go,
Yeah.
Yeah, I was really kind of bummed out though.
Yeah.
Because I wanted it to be fun. I wanted to get back into RoboCop, and I don't remember not liking this movie. That's the other thing that's really eating at me.
I was 13, so I mean, I was 13, so wow, I've never seen stuff like this. So of course I'm going to like it, but.
Yeah. All right. Well, real quick, before we jump into our 3 questions, we had some of the last few episodes we've forgotten to ask kind of like what your rating would be for this movie. So out of 5, let's say out of 5 Kane brains, he pulls Kane's brain from it and crushes it there at the end of the movie.
That sound that the skull made was awesome.
That was pretty good.
When it just popped off, and it goes, like, ooh.
And some of the sound, the effects, the creature effects, like that. I mean, all that stuff was really good. So they knocked that stuff out of the park too. But
sure,
yeah, just some other spots it was a little disappointing. But so out of 5 Kane brains, squished or not, it's up to you. What would you give this movie out of 5 Kane brains? I'm gonna go with a solid 2.
I was gonna say 2 squished brains.
Yeah, 2 yeah, definitely squished.
Yeah, I think I'll go with you guys on that one.
Okay,
2.
There was enough that it was entertaining, but story-wise, and it's just it missed a lot.
And I wonder too if my hanging on to it because I saw this one first. You kind of stick with, and that could be affecting it as well. So, yeah.
All right, are we ready for 3 questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Let's do it. Let's reboot our directives, and we'll get into our 3 questions.
He asks each traveler 5 questions. 3 questions. 3 questions.
It's impossible to answer.
Impossible because you don't know the answer.
Nobody could answer that question.
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. And I want to have them answered immediately.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Okay, 3 questions this time around.
I'm not
I did say
electrocuting myself for you.
Yeah, no. You don't have to electrocute yourself. That's totally fine. Stick your, take a fork and stick it in a socket somewhere in your living room. No, not going to do that.
No.
Although there is you should go look on.
I do, but
okay. Well, you are the Love Fest, so
that's right.
There it is. There it is.
I'm not going to go through and read all of them, but at some point, and maybe I can link this in our show notes somewhere. But if you go to the IMDb page for RoboCop 2 and go into the trivia section, there is a listing of all of his new directives that are uploaded. When he has all the
fun.
Somebody has written down. I'll just do a sampling of them before we jump into our 3 questions here. Some of RoboCop's new directives are. Directive 233, restrain hostile feelings. 234, promote positive attitude. Let's skip down a little bit. 240, participate in group activities. 243, pool opinions before expressing yourself. 245, if you haven't got anything nice to say, don't talk. 247, don't run through puddles and splash pedestrians or other cars. 250, don't walk across a ballroom floor swinging your arms.
That's
266, smile.
That's fun. They got some fun stuff.
Yeah. So they have this whole list of what flashes on the screen as his new directives when they have to reboot everything. So if you want to see all those, you can go check those out. I'll put them in a link on our website.
That's absolutely
all right.
Outstanding.
So 3 questions here. Question number 1, if you could create, and we got some Twitter feedback on some of these too. So I have some responses that I've recorded down from some folks that responded to these questions on Twitter or on Facebook. Number 1, if you could create a buddy cop movie where RoboCop partners up with one other fictional police officer, who would his partner be?
Oh, geez. Who is RoboCop's partner? You know, I'm going to take, if I could partner him up with anybody, honestly, I kind of like where they were going in the movie. With that gal that was his partner in the movie. I just wish they would have explored it more. I mean, like, I think she would have been great. So if you're gonna do that today, then I think you do that. I mean, whatever her, like, someone that is in the same vein as her in the modern sense, and then just explore that relationship. Because I'm not, you know what? And that's the thing. I'm not going to go through all the effort of casting them a perfect partner if they're not going to go through the effort of actually writing a script to show their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Well said.
I mean, that's kind of the thing. I think they found it. It was just, they're like, oh man, here we go. This person's awesome. The first one, they had some chemistry. This is great. Okay, let's not write about it.
Right.
That's our plan. That's our go-to plan. I mean, yeah. So there you go. That's what I think about that.
There we go. All right, Bo, what have you got?
Well, so I slightly pulled a John and couldn't just pick one.
You got the list.
You know,
it's only 2, but I sort of went with if I was going to recast it, I should do one serious.
Oh, I did that
one
too.
That could have led to comedy.
Yep, I did the same
so
thing.
So I have Roger Murtaugh.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Now that's my serious version because Roger's talking about how he's walking around with a metal partner all day and how he's getting too old for this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The comedy version, though,
which RoboCop replies, "Oh, see, there you go."
Wait, well, I missed it. What the comedy one is? What?
Axel Foley.
Axel Foley. There you go.
Because Eddie Murphy. I mean, Eddie Murphy makes anything better.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't give any of my responses before I posted this on Twitter. And that was Axel Foley. I did a serious and a funny. And Axel Foley was going to be my funny one. And then Jason Colvin at jcolvin24, but part of our Oklahoma contingent. Okay. That was his first response too, was definitely Axel Foley. So we had several people to which I responded and I said, you know what? Beverly Hills RoboCop would be a great movie.
It would be fantastic. And you could bring Bronson Pinchot back to sell RoboCop a special gun.
Mm-hmm.
And he could be, it would just be amazing.
I'm going to feel really bad when RoboCop finds that banana.
I ain't no fault, no banana, no tailpipe.
So the other thing, if he's got Murtaugh as his partner, RoboCop at some point in the movie is going to start saying, I'm getting too rusty for this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the best part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it'd be great. I think it'd be outstanding. So the ones I had for funny, I had Axel Foley was kind of my first one. And then as I thought about it, I'm like, you know what? Who else would be good for a funny one? And I was just trying to picture like who could play off of a RoboCop and be someone that you wouldn't even necessarily suspect that you'd put together with a RoboCop. And I thought of Peter Falk as Columbo.
Oh,
I almost thought that could be kind of funny. Like that, just the way, just his mannerisms, and if that's who RoboCop is trying to use as his way to mimic humanity and bring himself back to being human, I could see that having some funny moments available to it.
Totally.
So I could go that route too. My serious one was Dirty Harry. I thought that'd be kind of fun.
Yes.
If we want to just go,
pretty cool.
If we want two guys that are just going to make Detroit, I mean, if we're going to go dystopian, let's just go all out dystopian.
Right.
And let's have your 2 star cops on your police force be Dirty Harry and RoboCop.
That would be it.
We had some other responses from Twitter. We had Tristan Martin, who also I think is one of our Oklahoma contingent down there that listens to the show, said Phyllis Diller.
Nice.
I like that a lot.
That one works. I don't know if I remember Phyllis Diller being a cop at any point. You know, maybe she was in a skit or something. Was she?
I think that makes it better.
Well, it could, yeah. And then we had Mark Fox, who is at Zookeeper on Twitter, said Martin Riggs.
Okay.
See, also good. I mean,
got a little Lethal Weapon crossover there.
The problem with Riggs is already the crazy person.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're both walking into a hail of bullets,
mm-hmm.
who's the sane person in that duo?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not sure.
Or just instead of having the like the trampoline thing to land on, the cushion to land on when he jumps off the roof, does he just jump off the roof and like put RoboCop underneath himself?
Yeah.
So you make sure that's, you know. Thanks for breaking my fall, buddy.
Right.
All right. Question number 2. If you were given the opportunity to live on as a cyborg after your death, would you take it?
Okay. Describe the parameters. If we're talking like replacing a limb, la la Luke Skywalker, or integrating into your body, sort of like the police officer.
We're talking full on RoboCop. So you were either close to death or you were about to die. And they took your brain and your face and they slapped that onto a robot body.
No.
Okay. I think that's a solid no for me too.
I think I might, but you gotta promise me I'm not gonna lose my crap like Kane does.
Yeah.
You know, you gotta prove to me that I'm not gonna just go insane.
I think that's up to you.
Well, but is it? I feel like some of it's whatever they do to you when they put you in there. You know.
Well, that's true too.
True. But Kane was pretty messed up to begin with.
That's
I mean,
true.
they didn't quite get they didn't find the brain they wanted, so they got Abby normal. You know, I mean, that's kind of like, well, that was the brain she wanted, but she wasn't quite all there either. So
true.
You know, I feel like if they're gonna do that to you, Bo, they would, like, as they're installing you, they're smashing your Star Trek plates in front of you.
Oh, see.
Yeah, and then that's what turns you into Kane Robot.
Why you gotta go there, man?
I'm just looking for what would turn you. I'm trying to think of the extreme example, like you know how you react when the guys are taking all the stuff out of Delta House and they trip and they drop all the whiskey, and John Belushi just freaks out.
Oh, dude, you had to go there.
I'm sorry,
bro.
I'm sorry. It's RoboCop. RoboCop 2 did it to me. I'm sorry. It's not my fault.
See now, just to get over this, Bo is going to need to have a Gatling gun on his arm. And,
this is now a thing we need.
And I got to say, the kind of awkwardness of the 80s and 90s RoboCop is a bit like, nope, solid no, thank you. The RoboCop reboot, where he was like much more mobile and much more human-like, I'm like,
oh, the TV show?
No, the one that they did.
The movie
was that 2013,
oh, gosh, you know what? I don't know that I ever saw that.
Oh, really? It was.
Yeah, I check that out.
I remember it being good.
I enjoyed the TV show, so I bet I'd like it.
Yeah, I thought it was good, and I thought they actually went a little, maybe not. Well, I can't say whether they did good job or bad job, but they actually explored a little bit more that whole, like, are you human or not, as I recall.
All right. Number 3, you've been given the chance to write and cast the next RoboCop movie. What's the basic plot? Who's your Alex Murphy / RoboCop, and who is your Officer Lewis? I think I've pretty much already shared what mine would be. It would be you got to play up that whole, you know, what makes somebody human, and is he still in there somewhere? Is he trying to get back to being more human, even though on the outside he most definitely doesn't look human? Like, to me, that's you got to play that stuff up. Like, that's what it's got to be. It's got to be the relationship between him and his partner, or him and his wife, or, you know, it's got to be about the humanity piece of it. So whatever that needs to be, you know, him rediscovering his humanity while he's fighting for the little person.
Yes.
So that's my plot. My Alex Murphy RoboCop, I actually went with, because there are some times where I think he, in a couple of shows I've seen him in, he does a very good, almost like detached, emotionless person. But then he can also be very fiery and extreme in his reactions to things too. So I went with Anson Mount, you know, the guy who played Christopher Pike in Discovery. And he was, what I'm thinking of in particular, he was in a show called Hell on Wheels that was on AMC about the railroad across the United States.
Okay.
And he was really good in that show. So he would be my RoboCop. I would go with that. as my RoboCop. And my Lewis, I was trying to go with somebody that wasn't like an obvious like superstar actress pick. So I went with Felicity Jones, Jyn Erso from Rogue One.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen her in a couple of different things, and she's kind of a, I think she does a really good job of being a character who's kind of an unassuming but hopeful kind of person in some of the roles I've seen her in. I'm thinking particularly in Rogue One. I think she could be a good partner to try to help someone rediscover their humanity. I think of the scenes of like between her and Diego Luna's character when she's trying to like pull him away from just being a clear-cut, heartless assassin.
Mm-hmm.
So those would be mine. It's got to have humanity, Anson Mount, and Felicity Jones.
I always struggle with getting the characters or the actors and actresses, but I think, plot-wise, I think you're exactly right. And we've said it a bunch, exploring humanity, just doing something, just exploring something deeper than exploding action kind of thing. And I almost think, that they should go the direction of kind of what they did with Judge Dredd going to Dredd, or the Batman when Christopher Nolan rebooted them. Make it something that when you look at it, it's like got a little bit more of the real. And I'm not saying more violence or more grittiness or something, but just make it that like, you take Batman out of it and suddenly The Dark Knight becomes like this fantastic crime movie, I mean, which it was in the beginning, but it like takes the whole like comic, you know what I'm saying? Like it could stand alone. It's not just a comic book movie. And I think like go that same direction with this, make it a little bit more realistic, or well, as much as you can with the Cyborg walking around, but just go for that direction as opposed to more campy or more humor or more, okay, is this really what the future is going to look like kind of thing going on?
Well, especially now it's 2020. Like it's not so far fetched that you couldn't talk about replacing someone's limbs with robotic limbs. Right. It's not crazy now. It's, I mean, sure, we've got several situations where there's some stuff going on very similar to that. So, I think it's not outside the realm of possibility to treat that with a little bit more realism.
Yeah.
Of course, I closed that window when we were talking about something to look at something else. So, continuing my love affair with The Rock.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
The Rock is my RoboCop.
Okay.
And for his partner,
he doesn't even need the armor.
No. I went with someone who's played a cop. She's a grizzled old veteran cop now, but she's still pretty good at it. Mariska Hargitay from Law and Order SVU.
Oh, yeah.
I think she would be awesome on the other side of the car, without full body armor and everything.
Yeah.
And then my premise has the FBI has drafted RoboCop from Detroit because they need him to take down a gun smuggling ring. I guess that was the ATF, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's the FBI person who said she needs RoboCop, so she's the agent, and I need this RoboCop guy, and that's how they get paired together as partners. That's what I got.
Yeah. The other one that I've been saying for years, I wish they would do this, and that can go the route of the dealing with the humanity piece too, is do a RoboCop versus Terminator.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
I mean, they used to have the video game. Have you guys
versus Predator? Why not?
Well, I'm not sure Alien versus Predator is a strong enough argument to say why not. Because
no, I'm saying
I think the answer is in the question.
They made that movie. Why couldn't they make this one? Is I think my point.
Well,
You're going to do that. I got better ideas than that.
Well, just take the source material directly from the comics, because the comics are outstanding. The storyline of the comics. Have you guys ever read the comics?
No, but I know they exist, and the concept is outstanding.
You loaned them to me, John.
Yeah,
that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
the way they did that.
I mean, the whole idea being that he is kind of the beginning of Skynet, and that he almost has to choose between his roboticness and his humanity, and that's totally that same string that, at least in my opinion, should run through anything that has anything to do with RoboCop. And they've been doing some RoboCop comic book series, and I've picked up a few issues here and there over the last few years, and that's almost pretty much the writers are always going back to that well. They're going back to what does it mean to be a RoboCop? Like, what does that mean for Alex Murphy? What does that mean for RoboCop? And how do you balance those things? And how do you have this character develop over the course of time?
Right.
There's ways to do it. They didn't do it with this movie. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for RoboCop 2. I think we've maybe beaten this one is not enough. We've dismembered RoboCop over and over and over again. Apparently he's only destructible at the joints. So we found all the joints, and he's now in pieces on the side of the road.
Yep.
But you can join us back here. Yeah, there we go.
Good.
Good. Just leave him there. We don't need RoboCop 3. But maybe I don't know. We might not even cover that in 3 years. We might just zoom right past that. But we are 30 Podcast, 30podcast.com, at 30 Podcast on Twitter. You can call our voicemail line as well, or 872-356-6843, or you can interact with us on social media, however you'd like to do that. I do want to give a quick shout out to the Shirley Podcast guys, the Shirley You Can't Be Serious podcast. Have you guys had a chance to listen to any of their episodes?
I have not yet. I need
I
to.
haven't.
The stuff they've been posting on Facebook looks fantastic.
Yeah. So they had their first 2 episodes. It was 2 halves of the argument: which album is better, Thriller or Bad? And so they kind of do a deep dive into the first episode. It's kind of a deep dive into Thriller, and giving the reasons behind. And one of them will take one of them will take the stance that Thriller is better. The other one will take the stance that Bad is better. And they kind of do a deep dive into it, and each give their argument, and then unleash it upon social media to help them cast the deciding vote on it. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And there's been plenty of times, I'm sure they're listening because they listen to our show. There's been plenty of times that I am driving in my car and I am arguing right there with them. So anytime that you've got me arguing out loud in my car while I'm driving, your podcast is a hit. So nice job, gentlemen.
Yeah, that's cool. Well,
coming up next time for us, our next episode is going to be episode number 282, Young Guns 2. We're continuing on with the Revenge of the Sequel month, or who does number 2 work for? So next time it's going to be Young Guns 2 and then Predator 2. And then we're going to follow that up. This is where we get kind of a bit of a reprieve. My wife is a great sport. Like, she will watch a lot of these podcast movies with me. I know well enough for some of these movies, probably not to even bother asking for some of them, like RoboCop 2 and Predator 2 and things like that. But I do feel a whole lot better that once we're done with our sequel month, that we go into some of the other movies that will be a little bit more palatable and easier to watch, with Pretty Woman, Ghost, Mermaids. Pat, I know in March you're getting excited for Memphis Belle and some of the others. So
yeah.
So we got some good stuff coming. So if you're not as much a fan of some of the action movie sequels, because that's what most of these are for this month, if you're not so much a fan of that, just wait. We got some good stuff coming. If you're not a fan of this stuff, if you are a fan of this stuff, then just buckle up, because we've got more left to go this month. So Young Guns 2 and Predator 2 are coming up soon. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here with me.
Thank you, John.
All right, we'll see y'all back here next time for Young Guns 2. Be excellent to each other and go watch some good movies.